Thanks for staying with us. SanParks needs help to cull warthog, ostrich, gemsbok and kudu in some of the national parks. It's looking for reputable service providers and not trophy hunters, saying no posing with carcasses will be allowed. SanParks says payment will be made up front and the culling will have to take place between October and March of next year. To discuss this further, we're joined by the Managing Executive for Conservation at SanParks, Luthando Dziba. Luthando, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Culling, of course, is an ongoing part of conservation work. How did SanParks scientists go about listing what animals needed culling this time around?
Thank you for having me, Marcel. We conduct annual censuses and we determine the numbers in each and every one of our national parks. We then run models based on the state of the vegetation, considering both the weather conditions, climate, as well as generally the condition of the veld. And the scientists then work out based on that information available, including consideration of invasive alien species and other important considerations. We then determine how much food is available and we determine this general state of the grazing habitat to then assess and come to conclusion about the number of animals each of our national parks can keep.
And how has this year compared to other years? Because I know different parts of the country have been going through a drought over the last 3 years or so. Conditions have improved in some provinces indeed. But what were some of the main takeaways by the scientists this year that fueled their decision on culling this year?
We have had a number of considerations in the different national parks. For instance, in some of our arid parks, we have had long-term dry conditions. And in those parks, we have either stopped consideration for culling or have significantly reduced numbers of animals that would be eligible for culling. We also take into account particularly what we call extra-limital species, that is species that historically did not occur in particular national parks, like warthog. And we particularly focus on removing some of those species in order to enhance native biodiversity within those national parks.
Well, speaking of warthog, they seem to have been having a jolly good time procreating over the last while. I say so as a non-scientist completely, because if I look at the list of cullings, you're looking at a number of 1,400 warthog across a number of parks that will be culled. In the Addo Elephant National Park, that's just outside Port Elizabeth, 1,000 warthog will be culled. Talk to us a bit specifically about the warthog situation.
Well, warthog, reproduce quite rapidly and generally tend to have few predators that are successful at, hunting warthog as prey, lion in particular. They get hunted or get, preyed upon by cheetah, leopard, but tend to evade and as a result combine that with their reproductive rates. They tend to thrive in a number of national parks. We do see quite a significant increase in warthog on an annual basis, and parks like Addo National Park have obviously a big concern about warthog and their impact on the vegetation and broader ecosystem processes that have impact on other species within the national park.
Let's talk then about this call by SanParks looking for service providers to help you with this culling. How are you going to go about getting those who you allowed to help? How are you going to get them vetted and, of course, monitor that they are indeed sticking to these strict parameters that are being set up by SanParks to ensure that they cull in the most humane way possible?
We issue out a tender and invite service providers to apply. The tender document that we publish has got very detailed conditions under which we allow service providers to come and conduct culling within our national parks. I think at a basic level, we want to work with reputable service providers. We also want to ensure that they are qualified and have got all the necessary registrations with the Department of Agriculture, and have also licenses for every gun that is used in the culling, and that the cullers themselves have a particular license for operating a specific gun that they are operating. Once they are within the national park, one of the regulations is that they can never have or utilize alcohol during the culling process. And so alcohol is banned, and I'm happy to say that we did that even before, the current regulations. We also ensure that there is a SanParks staff member in each of the vehicles that are involved, or if there are helicopters involved, in each of the helicopters involved in the culling process. The main reason is to really put out stringent measures that ensure that the culling process takes place according to the contract conditions that we stipulate openly in our tender process.
Just before I let you go, Luthando, we've spoken quite scientifically about the subject of culling, but it is something that many people sometimes feel quite emotional about, because the killing of our beautiful animals is not something that you want to see. I suppose for you it's part of your job. You all work with scientists. You know that you're doing this to keep other animals alive and to keep your conservation spaces thriving. Is it difficult sometimes to keep the emotion out of it when you go about a process like this?
We try as much as possible to rely on the science and to be informed by facts on the ground with regards to what we need to do in the interest of broader biodiversity. And really, what motivates us is the fact that within the smaller national parks, numbers of animals can grow, and it is actually for the welfare of animals that we have to, from time to time, take out some animals within the system. If we don't do that, obviously, they could deplete vegetation, and animals could die. Like we see usually during periods of extreme drought. We also take animals out of our national parks to contribute to the broader transformation of the wildlife economy. We have a program where we give wildlife loans and donations to communities. We also call in order to contribute to provision of benefits to communities that neighbor national parks. So there are a number of motivations that we take into account. Obviously, doing that within the legal frameworks and also making sure that it is done as humanely as possible is one of the things that we emphasize within our own conditions for how we conduct culling. So it is an emotive thing, but we really try to approach it from a scientific point of view, and to ensure that it is done, as humanly as possible and within national regulations for culling.
Well, we thank you so much for your input and your insight. SanParks Managing Executive for Conservation there, Luthando Dziba.